everybody, today we're going to look at how I'm going to do my stamp that I put on the back of my Christmas cards every year. I don't know if you remember from last year, but I always tag the back of my card with a little stamp with my initials, and now I started putting my YouTube channel on there as well. So that's kind of an interesting way I'm going to have to go about it since I'm doing fabric this year. It's not quite as simple as stamping onto paper, so I've got a strategy for how I'm going to tag my cards this year, and I'm going to show you how I'm going to do it. So I've decided the way I'm going to do this is to make a little fabric tag, kind of like a label with my information on it. And so to do that, we're going to need fabric, fusible interfacing, a quilting ruler, pinking shears, pencil, ink pads, and of course our stamps. So let's start with our fabric. So for this, I'm just using a bunch of white scraps that I have in my stash. Since I'm making these tags pretty small, I don't need a huge piece of fabric, and I've just got a lot of white scraps left over, so this is a good way for me to use them up. And so I mentioned that we're going to use some fusible interfacing. I used this lightweight fusible interfacing because I don't need these to be super structured. It's just to help me cut them and keep them in shape without having, my fabric too floppy. And I've actually already applied the fusible interfacing on these. I've showed you how I do it in a few other videos, so I didn't feel like you needed to sit through that again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab one sheet of this fabric. Okay. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut these into small tags. And since I've already got it stabilized, which means applying the interfacing, I'm ready to cut it. So I'm going to use my pinking shears, which if you don't know what pinking shears is, it's these ones with these kind of the zigzag teeth. And these ones, I actually think these were my grandma's pinking shears, and they're super heavy duty, still in great shape. And yeah, I love using them. So what I'm going to do is first I'm going to cut an edge of my fabric just to measure from. So I'm going to cut, I think I'm going to just do this bottom edge here. So I'm going to pink that all the way along. And the purpose of pinking shears is the pinked edge, which is, the zigzag edge, it's not supposed to fray as much as just a straight cut edge. I'm doing it for this just because I think it's cute. So I'm going to pink all the way along that edge. And I'm not keeping this super straight because I want these to kind of have a little bit of a homemade feel, because they are homemade, and I just think that'll be the right vibe I'm going for. So now I've got a somewhat straight edge, and I've determined that the size I need for these tags is about 2 inches by 2.5 inches. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my quilting ruler and just mark out a rough 2-inch line from my cut edge. And that's what I'm going to cut on for my next row. And then I'm going to do another 2 inches from that. Actually, I might do 2.5 inches since this isn't going to be 2.5. I want to get as much as I can out of this piece of fabric that I'll cut these ones 2 inches this way instead of 2.5. I'm just kind of making it up as I go. And I'm not making a super, super dark line because I don't want it to show through when I've cut my tags. So, as you can expect, I'm going to cut along these lines. And we'll fast forward this a little bit. Alright, so I've got my 2 strips. And then I'm going to do the same to mark out my cuts going along the strip. So this one I'm going to mark it every 2.5 inches. This one I'm going to mark it every 2 inches. Don't need that, that's a scrap. This edge is already pinked from a previous project, so I'm going to start from that edge, but I'm also going to square off this edge a little bit since it's not straight. And I'm just going to eyeball that. And I'll mark off my lines and do my cuts. Okay, and there's all of our pieces cut out. So we've got our nice white fabric side and then the side with the interfacing, which will sew them down with the white side up, of course. And there we go. So the next thing we're gonna do, as you may have guessed, is stamp the logo on there. So let's get our stamping supplies. Okay, so I've got ink and I've got my 3 stamps that I'm gonna put on it. The stamps I've got are my Aunt Jenny Crafts YouTube information, and this is made with it's a Martha Stewart kit from, I don't know, a number of years ago that I don't think they make anymore, but it's one where you can set your own letters into it. It's pretty cool. You maybe can still find them on eBay, but I mostly just use it for stuff like this, like tagging things I've made. This is my logo stamp. It's my initials in a little heart. I carved this myself using a stamp carving kit. And then I've got my date stamp. I don't think I'm gonna stamp it today because I like to stamp them with the date the card was completed, but I'm gonna leave space for this in the middle of my stamp, or in the middle of my tag, excuse me. So those are the 3 stamps, and then I've got my 2 colors of ink. We're gonna do red for the little heart logo and then black for the text. I picked up these, it's Memento Luxe ink, and I got these at Joann, and I selected them because they said they were good for fabric. And with my tests, it's worked pretty well. Since I'm not gonna be washing these, I'm not too worried about the color fastness. I just wanted something that would show up nice and bright on my fabric, and it seemed like this did. So we're gonna start with the black, I think, and we'll do our little Aunt Jenny Crafts YouTube information. So, I mean, stamping's pretty self-explanatory, right? I'm just gonna tap it on there, get some ink, and then line it up on my little stamp tag here. I'm sort of rocking it back and forth to make sure it gets on there nice and clear. And there we go. So that came out really nice, I think. It's really clear what it says. I feel like it's even clearer than it came out on my paper last year. So that's cool. So there's our black. And then I'm gonna do my red heart, which I'm gonna put it up here, and I'm gonna leave a space in the middle for the date. So I'm gonna do the same thing. And this one I always have to be careful with because there's, it's a pretty thin stamp. I don't have a backing on it. I get my fingers inky all the time when I'm doing this. So I'm gonna just put my little heart right there. I'm gonna press kind of hard again because there's no like backing on it. There's nothing to kind of go against this except my fingers. So there we go. And that came out nice and clear as well. So there is my tag that I'm going to sew onto the back of my cards. And then once the card is complete, I'll stamp the date right there. And that'll be how I tag it. So next, let's take a look how I'm going to attach these to the cards.